So good morning, everybody. Warmly welcome here at this Phidias webinar. This is actually the second Phidias webinar in collaboration with the Blue Cloud project. I just want to introduce myself very briefly. I am Francesco Zimanti, and I'm the communication officer for the Phidias project. I take care with some other colleagues from CNES and Nihovia of the dissemination and communication aspect of Phidias. So what is Phidias? Phidias, I think you are well aware of the project and you are familiar with what Phidias is. Very, very shortly, in a nutshell, I'm going to recap for you. Phidias is a European project that is funded under the CEF program, the Connecting Europe facility, and that started 10 months ago, back in September 2019, and it's going to run for the next 36 months until 2022. But the project brings together a broad consortium of 13 different partners that are coming from 5 different European countries. Each of them are specialized in different domains, mostly the management of HPC, data management, communication, and outreach as well. What is the purpose of this project? The project aims at enabling hard science and HPC community to discover, manage, and process spatial and environmental data spanning from atmosphere, Earth surface, and oceans. How is this going to happen? What is the core of the project? This is going to be happening with the development of 3 use cases that will be deployed as a service for a wide array of end users, encompassing the scientific community, public authorities, citizens, and private players and industry players as well. So which are these 3 use cases? Namely, they are the intelligent screening of satellite data, big data Earth observation, and the ocean. We actually ran our first webinar 4 months ago, back in February, where we provided a global overview of Phidias, of the main purposes and objective of the project. But we decided now that it was about time to zoom into these 3 use cases. And we are going to be starting today with the oceans one. So you can see in here the agenda of the webinar with the related speakers. So most importantly, we have a team of very reputable speakers. You can see here Cécile Nis and Gilbert Moder from Ephemer, France, Jukka Seppala from SAIC, Finland, Alexander Barth from the University of Liège, and we have at the end a very special guest, that is Pasquale Pagano from CNR ISTI, that he will speak on behalf of the Blue Cloud project. The Blue Cloud project is a European H2020 initiative that is focused on providing innovative services for marine research and blue economy. But I will leave up to him to zoom in more into depth in the Blue Cloud project. So I won't take any longer with my introduction, and because I want to leave the floor to our speakers, I just want to remind you a couple of features that we have enabled for this webinar. So first and foremost, we have the possibility to drop questions anytime during the webinar. We will have a Q&A session at the end, and we can tackle your question throughout the span of the webinar as well. Just use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. You could see a bar, so use that anytime you want. The second one, we set up some polls, some instant surveys, some questions that you will see popping up in your screen throughout the duration of the webinar, and you will be able to respond according to your needs. So, said that, I will leave the floor to the first speaker, that is Cécile Nis, and I will pass you the screen. And whenever you want, you can go, Cécile. You're still muted, I think. Cécile?
Yes.
Yeah, now I can hear you, and you can go.
Thank you. So good morning, everybody. So as told by Francesco, we're going to speak a bit about the ocean use case. So how the PHIDIAS can help and the ocean use case. And contribution of HPC to marine studies. So the ocean use case will mainly focus, we're going to say, to help combine, collate, and process data from several data sources, so in situ and satellite data. As you can see on the picture on the right, there are lots of different means to observe the ocean. So it can be satellites, it can be drones, it can be ships, it can be different other tools. That makes a huge amount of data, and also the data are quite different depending on the tools. Also, most observation you do in the sea and in the ocean, you cannot reproduce them because the sea change, we're going to say every minute, every day. So for this, we're going to help enhancing the data archiving in order to facilitate the data reuse, and also to facilitate and speed up the colocalization and process from different sources. How we're going to do this is by adopting new data structures based on big data technologies like data cubes, NoSQL databases, semantic web, and providing on-demand data browsing and processing facilities. The ocean use case will mainly focus on 2 case studies. So one of the case studies will be about surface salinity in North Atlantic using CTD data from SeaDataNet, algal floats, most satellite data. And the second case study will be about coral field in the Northeast Atlantic and Baltic Sea. For this, we have the data has kind of a flow. So we have data, the observation arrives in an infrastructure. As I told you before, the data can have many forms and also different units. So there is a need of harmonization based on vocabularies, but also harmonization by way of better describing your data in order for people to easily find your data. And the description harmonization will be added in a catalog of that data infrastructure for an easier access and findable data. So you have different data infrastructures, that means different catalogs, and all of them, the objective will be to make a kind of data collection that we call a data lake, in order to have for the one analyzing, so processing the data, the researchers and so on, to have one way that they can access the data through one way, and from that one way they have access of the data through all different data infrastructures. For this, we will have Gilbert is going to do Peter Tay's presentation about the exploring advanced cloud services and marine and ocean data access and data management. So this will focus on the diversity of data that implies, so as I told you before, having good description of that, metadata, and also for principles. Then we will have Yuka Sepala, that's from Sky, that's going to present more, we're going to say, part of harmonization and collection. So passport photos for plankton, the new area for marine biology research. So as some data sets are quite large or use numerous observation, and you have different data collections, this both, as we told before, improve data access by putting everything in data lake and have one unique way of accessing them also. And finally, we will have Alexander that's going to speak more specifically about the DIVAnd software, so about analyzing the ocean observation in an HPC infrastructure. Because it's not enough to have the data. You have to process the data in order to analyze it. And this requires specific softwares and powerful IT infrastructures. So this is it. If you have any question, can we know? Otherwise, we have a specific slot later on. I'm now going to leave the floor to Gilbert.
Yes, Gilbert can start presentation, and of course, I will remind you anytime that you can drop your question in a Q&A box, and we can tackle multiple questions even at the end. But feel free, because grab this chance to talk with these technical people, so you can go wild with your questions. So Gilbert, up to you.
Okay, do you hear me properly? Yeah.
Yes, yes, perfect.
Okay, thank you. I will do this presentation on behalf of Peter Theisse, who is not able to join us today, but Peter prepared this presentation. First of all, after a short introduction reminding the main objective of my presentation, I will focus on data resource and description of data resources which will be involved in the use case, the ocean use case. And after that, I will present a little bit the discovery services and the prototype of data lake for processing, and that will help us to speed up the data access for data processing. And so, just a small recap of the objective of this use case is to make use, in fact, of HPC services for marine data, and to try to adapt or to adopt, in the case of marine data processing and marine data access and so on, HPC infrastructure and cloud services, related cloud services, in order to speed up data services and data discovery, data access in a fair perspective for marine data, in fact, and taking account the European context, such as the European Open Science Cloud, the Copernicus Data and Information Access Services, called DIAS, and especially in our case, WCAO DIAS. Obviously, also, and Lino will present Blue Cloud. This use case could be considered as a prototype of services to test technologies which can after be implemented in the Blue Cloud and by the Blue Cloud project. And that's also important because it's a kind of trajectory for implementing in real environment this use case. And so, as Cécile already presented, in this use case, mainly four data sources will be used as input for processing. CDataNet, in situ datasets, which come from real diversity of observatories, from vessel to submarines, buoy, floats, and so on. EuroArgo in situ data, which are mostly focused on Argo floats, so a specific in situ observatory deployed at international level, and SMOS and Sentinel satellite data, one for salinity and Sentinel for ocean color and imagery, and CMEMS in situ data, which can be complementary from the two other in situ data sets. So these data sources have different characteristics, and satellite data, for example, are very large but quite homogeneous. And as the opposite, in situ data are much smaller but very numerous and also very heterogeneous. For example, in terms of geographical and temporal resolution, from one observation to another one, the temporal resolution could be really different. And also in terms of observed variables, from one observation to another one, the observed variables could be also very different. As a consequence, in-situ data requires a very accurate description, that is metadata, in fact, to be in order to be exploited properly, discovered, exploited, and processed. And that's the reason why we really need, especially for in-situ data, dedicated discovery services, which will be built up of metadata of available data sets. And those metadata have been produced by the infrastructure I just described before. And but we really want to improve the way that the discovery services will be implemented, in fact, by, for example, use metadata indexes such as Elasticsearch, or relying, for example, on Elasticsearch technologies in order to really speed up the user interface to discover metadata, and to speed up the communication between the catalog of metadata and the user. And that's a key point, because those metadata could be very, very numerous. And so, obviously, as said before, metadata is a key point. In this context, the metadata will rely on the ISO 19115 standard, because all data are georeferenced, and mainly this standard applies to all georeference data sets, and that's also a reason why to be compatible with this metadata standards, with all these let's say, fields of metadata, and especially keywords that provides, in fact, variables that describe the variables which are available in the data sets. And for that, we have also to make use of common vocabularies. These common vocabularies have been established in general in international context by international programs. One example of these vocabularies is the essential ocean variables, which describes the variables which are available in the datasets. One of the objectives of PHIDIAS is also to harmonize metadata between environmental domains, such as the atmosphere, the geosphere, and of course the oceans, in order to facilitate data analysis, data processing at interfaces between these different domains, such as the interfaces between ocean and atmosphere, or to make data processing around, for example, the shoreline between the continental surfaces and the ocean. That's also an objective of PHIDIAS, and to harmonize, in fact, metadata between, and discovery service as a consequence, between this domain with other use cases. Another important key point or question is also the question of data storage, data structures. As described before, the data which will be engaged in this use case are stored in different repositories and stored also using different data formats and they are made available using different protocols and so on. As a consequence, data processing is quite inefficient because we have to access data from remote locations, and also for programmers who develop software, it's very painful to access different data sets because they have to make use of different APIs to access these data sets. So the idea is really to try to harmonize that in what we call a data lake, in fact, which provide homogeneous data access protocols, and also which try to adapt and to adopt data structure which let us to speed up data processing, and also, for example, by letting us to implement parallel processing. And that's also a key point for this use case. So as a consequence, we will test two types of data structures, and to try to improve or to solve the problems which have been described just before. And these two data structures will be NoSQL databases, especially for in-situ data, which are heterogeneous and very numerous. And to speed up, in fact, the access, the purpose of this NoSQL database will be to speed up the access of a small amount of data in a large amount of data in data collection, for example. And that is to implement, for example, visualization of time series or vertical profiles, or specific time series, specific data vertical profiles from a specific location, and after data selection by user, and to retrieve this data mostly immediately. And for that, we imagine to make use of a NoSQL database, and especially Cassandra NoSQL database. The second type of data storage we want to implement is, let's say, data cubes, or data structure which can be used to retrieve or to access a large amount of data from within large data sets, and data structure also which allows parallel access in parallel processing, in fact, of data. And for that purpose, we will probably implement X-array and ZAR format from the Pangeo, developed by the Pangeo community, which provide this kind of data structures. And these data structures, both Cassandra or NoSQL data structure or database, and data cubes will be populated by copying the original data sets from their original formats, in fact, in general, NetCDF in our case, and to these new data structures. And that means that data will be duplicated, in fact, from the original data repositories to this data lake within these new data structures. and that means that we need, in fact, more data storage and more disk capacities, and especially for parallel processing. And doing that, we expect paying the price of duplication of the data. We expect to be able to speed up both data access from, for example, the web portal, and also to speed up the time response for processing and processing data in parallel, in fact, in the context of HPC. So thank you for your attention, and if you have questions now or later, please.
Yes, Gilbert, thanks a lot for your very informative presentation. We have a few questions, but I will just pick up one of them. If you can give a brief response to Michel Fichot, that he's asking which parameters will be taken into account in these use cases? He meant temperature, salinity.
Yes, mainly it will be in the Atlantic, temperature, salinity, and but in the Baltic part of the use case, it will be also plankton and ocean color. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. And I think we can move on now with Jukka. It's your turn.
Okay, hello.
Good morning. I can hear you loud and clear.
Good morning, everyone. I try to share my screen. Do you see it?
Yes.
I hope to put it in a presentation mode still. Okay. So my name is Jukka Seppälä. Yeah, my name is Jukka Seppälä, and my co-authors Seppo, Kaisa, and Otso, they come also from the Finnish Environment Institute, Syke. And this is now a little bit different data type. I mean, it's images, but let's start from the more traditional phytoplankton data. So basically, we collect information of the ocean color or information of chlorophyll using in situ sensors and lab analyses to understand the abundance of phytoplankton. And why we need that kind of information is, in a global context, it is that phytoplankton contributes roughly 50% of the global photosynthesis, so it's a very important player in our Earth and in our climate. These measurements, they have a lot of uncertainties, and we have a lot of undersampling. We also know that the Earth observation models, they are not always performing very well in the coastal seas. But we have to get more information on the phytoplankton and to get the unknowns resolved for the global carbon budget, etc. So we are normally using chlorophyll as a key pigment of phytoplankton as a proxy of phytoplankton biomass. Here you see two kind of information products. On the left-hand side, we have a satellite map showing the color presenting where the chlorophyll, how the chlorophyll is distributed in a globe. Then on the right-hand side, we have the so-called ferry box measurement in the Baltic Sea, a ferry traveling across the Baltic basically every day on the sea, and we have some millions of measurements per year and providing us a nice understanding how the biomass is fluctuating. But although the information is plenty and it's very useful, we are still lacking one very critical component, which is a species or group specific information, and that's especially important when we try to understand how the ecosystem functions and how it functions as part of the biochemical fluxes. So the bulk estimate of chlorophyll, it does not really contain any information of the diversity of the phytoplankton. We need other methods to do that. And basically we also know that the phytoplankton community composition, it's very much affected by the environmental and anthropogenic forcing factors. So two different regions are most likely having two different types of phytoplankton. And these communities, they respond very, very quickly. I mean, in a kind of time frame of days, even hours, to the rhythms of aquatic environments. So we have to have new methods which we can use to observe these rapid shifts in the phytoplankton composition. And phytoplankton, I mean, the diversity within phytoplankton, it's very kind of huge. We have very many several functional types, and they affect differently in the elemental fluxes and the structure of the food web. Some are, for example, good food for zooplankton and for fish, and some are not. So it's really kind of a pragmatic reason why we need to know what kind of phytoplankton we have. And the bottom figure, it shows now some of the passport photos we have taken with our robotic sensor in the Baltic Sea. So these are automatic photos taken from the organisms. This is how it looks like. And the scale is some kind of, let's say, average size of these guys is something like 20 to 30 micrometers, but they can be even smaller. So why we do that? Traditional microscopy is the basic method to study phytoplankton composition, but I mean, one trained microscopist analyzes one sample per day, roughly. But we have new technologies based on optics, fluidics, and imaging, and they actually offer us very rapid, automated, and cost-efficient way to get information on phytoplankton composition. And related to Phidias, there is also twist that actually these images we have collected, you can store them and you can reanalyze them as your capacity increases, and you can share them with your community. The figures show one example of the massive cyanobacteria bloom we had in 2018 in the Gulf of Finland. The end of the arrow shows our sampling location with the imaging fly-pseudobot machine, which is taking samples every 20 minutes and analyzing the different taxonomic compositions we have in the phytoplankton community. And in this context, we have one study showing the different species during the bloom. How did they fluctuate during the bloom period as a biomass? So we have three very similarly looking species. You cannot separate them from the satellite or from the ferry box measurements, but with this device you can understand how they kind of come and go. And what's important here is as well that some of these species can be toxic and some are not toxic. So it's good knowledge also for different users of the sea. Plankton imaging is not one single machine, but it's various technologies. So shown in the graph here, just an example of very recent review paper, good one, published in the Frontiers in Marine Science, showing the scale of the organisms we have and the different technologies we have to observe them. And in this study, or in these next slides, I'm showing something from the imaging flow-pseudobot machine, which is fitting into the size of, let's say, from 10 micrometers up to 100 micrometers. So we have several technologies available within the European community. We have especially the CytoSense technology, where we have several users and very good groups already kind of working with the common vocabularies in the Sea Data Cloud. We have, I mean, then the next step, after you have collected those millions of images, it's again not work for human to give names for them, but you need some machine learning algorithms, and the development is ongoing. We don't have one settled system yet. Also, what is lacking is the kind of central storage place for our images, or kind of general agreement how we use the metadata. Over here, we have very good forerunners in Europe called Ecotaxa. It's a web application for where you can visually explore the species or the images and the taxonomic names given to them. And this is a work led by the Villefranche group in France. If we then go to our sampling location at Baltic Sea, so we have a remote location there, sampling hut, and full of nice machines. Imaging flow-pseudobot is our imager. So it takes images of the small phytoplankton cells. It operates there continuously. without kind of daily attention. It samples the seawater every 20 minutes, and it takes photos when the algae passes the field of the view of the camera. And with this method, you can end up with, let's say, 30,000 high-resolution images per hour. And then you will have a problem where you put your images and how you analyze them. And we are now working towards the neural network methods for the image recognition. So what is Phidias doing here? We have the operational things running from our side, collecting images at the island, and within the network of Finnish Meteorological Institute, we transfer the images to their server, and then starts the Phidias part where we are trying to make a small corner of Phidias Ocean case. It's not the whole ocean case, but very minor part of that, where we kind of approach and try to understand what is needed there in a regional scale, and can that be then kind of upgraded. But we are transferring our images to the CSC Allas Object Storage, which is a data pool, and CSC is a Finnish Center for Scientific Computing, included in the Phidias project as well. So this is the place for data storage and sharing. Then we have a different links. We want to study different versions or develop different versions of neural network models. This is most likely done under the CSC cloud computing services. But once we have the model up and running for the daily use, then I think we are moving towards the high performance computing machine PHIDIAS, feeding in the images, and what comes out is the image with the species name. So the machine does the learning, of course, assisted by the trained taxonomist who knows basically the thing, but who is not able to label all the million of images. And then comes after that, the things come back to the data pool, and from there we kind of vision that this is the place where we can distribute our data to the different data aggregators, if it's Ecotaxa or if it's some other long-term storage, and also the other users. So these are the elements we are a little bit studying here. And if we think about the whole multi-platform detection of phytoplankton, this is the example of the 2018 bloom. We have the satellite information on the left. We have the ferry-based information showing the transect between Helsinki and Stockholm, how the bloom was concentrated in the July month. We have the profiling buoy information showing the kind of the vertical position of the bloom in the water column. And then we have the images showing which species are there. And we have some kind of course, we need to connect the information, try to understand that how they match together. And then we have the DIVA things, kind of making an interpolation of the information, and that's what the next presentation is about. So this is where the things kind of mix together. And with these words, I thank you and hope to see you again. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jukka. I have a couple of questions. So from Xiaoyu, excuse me if I misspelled your your name. So how to tackle the issues of heterogeneity of data observation, for example, few or large number of observation depth. If you can give a quick answer, then we will pick up the other question maybe for the end.
Oh, this is a very difficult. I'm not sure what is meant by the heterogeneity of the data observation. If it's related to the multi-platform detection, I mean, this is the nature of these issues, that some kind of lab analysis that require lab analysis, they are most often very precise but very random in your data set. And then, yeah, I'm not really sure if I understood the question right.
Okay, I guess it's a very complicated one.
Yes.
You can
Yes.
go back to Xiaoyu in a private chat anytime.
Yes, we do that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Yuka. So thanks a lot, and now yeah, keep using the Q&A whenever you like, and let's move on with Alexander Belt from the University of Liège now, and I'll leave the floor to you now, Alexander.
Thank you, Francesco.
Yeah. I can't see your screen yet.
This will stop. Yes. Okay. Share. Can you see my screen?
We can see it now, and up to
great.
you.
Okay. So thank you very much. So it's really nice that you joined this webinar. It's quite nice to see so many familiar names in the attendance list. So we are presenting DIVAnd, which is a tool to analyze ocean data. And in particular here, we focus on the HPC infrastructure part. So as you know from other presentations, the ocean is quite complex. There are many processes happening at the same time, and there's non-linear action between them. And the processes cover a wide space and time spectrum of scales. And there's also complex interaction between all these scales. So as a result, we have a very diverse sets of ocean observations in order to handle all these processes and scales. And here are some platforms that typically used to measure the ocean, like lidars, satellites, research vessels. So ocean observations are quite valuable, but they are unfortunately quite sparse as well. So this leads to given the diversity leads to a lot of different formats that are out there, and there's a general trend towards NetCDF. And in order to use this data efficiently, you would need to have fast access to the data. In the term of HPC inside the for ocean for the ocean domain, Fortran is a lot of use, still quite often used for numerical ocean models, but it's less used to manipulate data to make some data exploratory work. While MATLAB has been quite used, it's quite a lot used maybe 5 or 10 years ago, but it's less used today, I would say. And I see more and more people actually using language like Python, R, but also Julia or other languages. So we are started to use the programming language Julia since now about 3 years ago, and we're quite happy with it. And there's also a nice Nature article about this language. So our main tool that I present here, it's called DIVA, which stands for Data Interpolating Variational Analysis. So it essentially derives a gridded field based from in situ observations. So we require that the gridded field is close observations, obviously, but also smooth in space and possibly time. So it does not has any abrupt gradients. So kind of the mental model that you can have that's might sometimes useful to see what DIVA is doing is, imagine if you have a one-dimensional case and you want to have a bunch of observations, you want to find a good compromise between passing through all these points, but still being smooth. So something like a flexible rod would do when you are flexing it. So this was actually the first case of spline interpolations, kind of mechanical spline interpolations. What DIVA is doing is solving this kind of equation numerically, but it's also a spline interpolation essentially. So for DIVA, we are organizing several workshops on the annual or biannual basis, and using various tools. So the code itself is hosted on GitHub, and we're testing our code on various platforms like Linux, macOS, Windows, using CI services. And so DIVAnd is a Julia package that you can install directly from using the Julia package manager, but also we are providing this software in a container using Docker container or Singularity containers, and which can be then easily used in for instance, in Jupyter Notebook or in virtual research environments based on a Jupyter Hub, for instance. So here, this is one of these. This is one of the main application that when we started to make DIVAnd available in the virtual research environment. This is work that's done in the context of the CData cloud project. And among others, there are also WebODV or a data visualization tool developed by Deltares, which is also available inside this virtual research environment. And there will also be, DIVA will also be available in the Blue Cloud virtual research environment. So in terms of computing resources, DIVA needs to solve a quite large matrix systems. So we have implemented different solvers, like either direct solver, which is very fast but needs a lot of memory, or iterative solver, which are more memory efficient but are slower than direct solver. So in practice, we recommend users to use the direct solver as long as it fits within the available memory. But computing resources, in particular memory, has been a problem for some of our users. And in the context of HPC, we also looked into a Singularity container, which is also quite an interesting approach in order to make to transfer your software from one HPC system to another HPC system by bundling all of the libraries inside a container image. And it worked quite well. There's another tool that we are recently looking at that's recently developing. It's actually more specific to satellite data. And it's in fact a neural network to reconstruct missing data in satellite images. And we originally programmed it in Python using TensorFlow. And yeah, we were considering to upgrading from TensorFlow 1 to TensorFlow 2, but TensorFlow 2 is very different from TensorFlow 1. So we also looked into Julia, and Julia has also quite major machine learning libraries or neural network libraries. And it turned out that also using Julia instead of Python reduced also quite significantly the computational time. This is because we're applying what's something called data augmentation. So in order to make the neural network more robust, we're training it on perturbed data. Perturbed in various ways. We are holding some part of the data. So, and for this, Julia is also very efficient to do this. So, and most of the speed improvement does actually come from more efficient data augmentation. And here is some results of satellite data. This is the sea surface temperature in the Adriatic Sea. And so we're adding additional clouds and then trying to reconstruct them. And we see that the reconstruction represents fairly well what was actually measured by the satellite. There's some smoothing involved, but that's expected, but because we're withholding some data. And some interesting aspect also of the way that we apply the neural network into DIVAnd, we can actually provide also a pixel by pixel error estimate. So we're not only providing what is the actual likely value of temperature on the clouds, but also giving a reasonable error estimate. So in conclusion, so you have seen that the types of ocean data is quite diverse. And while for modeling, Fortran is still quite used heavily for oceanographic HPC, but for data manipulation, other languages are more suitable. In particular, Python, R, and Julia. For us, Julia has been a really good fit for data analysis. And we wrote actually our original, Diva was originally written in Fortran, and we have transitioned to Julia, and it worked quite well for us. And so the primary way to interact DIVAnd, or the recommended way for, initially at least, is to use Jupyter notebooks. And this is also implemented. This helps us implement virtual research environment quite easy, because Jupyter notebooks themselves are already web environments. But in future, there's a big shift towards general purpose GPU computing, or using of other type of accelerators in the HPC environment. So it's quite important to think about how to adapt existing tools or adapt new algorithms to enable to leverage this new kind of devices, computing devices. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much, Alexander. Before closing the webinar with Pasquale's presentation, I have a question for you that it seems I don't know actually if it's addressed to you or to the previous speakers, but we have a user that is asking how much technology, I think generally speaking, for observation can progress farther from where we are now. I think he wants to know, generally speaking, if we reach the tipping point with the technology development, or there is space for improvement, let's say.
Oh yeah, I think so. So technology, well, for instance, autonomous platforms like gliders, like Argo drifters, they have really make a big impact on in situ measurements, on the types of in situ measurements, of the diversity of the coverage in terms of in situ measurements, or HF radar technologies, which are the first time that we can measure currents over a wide range of scales. So this made a really big impact. And also for the satellite data, there's also a lot of things going on. So recently we are able to measure salinity that was never possible before. So maybe there are another technologies allowing to measure surface currents, like one of the proposal, I think, is a SCIM proposal, which unfortunately was not funded from ESA, which would have allowed to measure surface current measurements from satellites. So these are really a lot of so from the measurement side, there are a lot of new technology changes. And as well from the computing side, there's a lot of new interesting things going on, and there's a lot of things to that scientists can utilize, in order to improve their work. So that's yeah, I think a lot of things going on, more than before, I would say.
Yeah, it's very good. You've been crystal clear, Alexander. I can imagine there is a lot going on, and it could be a huge debate to move on in that direction. And okay, so before getting to the closing session and the final round table, I will leave the floor for the final presentation to Pasquale Pagano, so he can give an exhaustive overview of this beautiful Blue Cloud project that we are very proud to have established a synergy, so solid synergy with. So up to you, Pasquale. We can see your screen.
Okay, thanks, Francesco. Good morning, everyone. So I'm going to present, very shortly, the Blue Cloud project and the synergies, with the European Open Science Cloud. So first of all, our mission is to build, a new pilot that implement a cyber platform that bring together and provide access to data from observation models, but also to analytical tools and computing facilities. So the idea is to provide, to the researchers, an environment where they can access data use, the analytical tools that we provide, but also can integrate, their own analytical tools and then they can exploit easily, cloud computing facilities. So, and this is meant, clearly for researchers in the area of the, the blue community. So the ones that work, on ocean sustainability. In order to implement this, we decided, to implement two main components, let me say. One is a component that provides discovery and access to a series of established European marine data management processing infrastructures in such a way that, to facilitate, the researchers when they have to access a large amount of data, as much as possible, to standardize, this data that have been accumulated by the researchers, and then provide an environment, that is a virtual research environment where, the researchers can execute their analytical workflows in order to solve, specific use cases and to implement, demonstrators or in general, data analytical processes. So, so as I say, there are two main components. There are two main components in the technical framework that we are implementing. One is to serve, federated discovery and access, and the other one is to deliver a blue cloud virtual research environment that, support, collaboration among researchers and communication. So these two components, the first one will provide access, to a number of blue data infrastructure, and you see here in the left part of this slide. So we will provide access, to eModnet data, to Europis, to CDATanet, to EURARGO, and then to OTAXA, that also was mentioned, in the previous presentation, but also to Elixir and to Eurobioimaging and to the European Nucleotide Archive. And we will exploit, computational resources that are mainly provided by the For Science infrastructure and DIVAnd, and we will provide access to the DIAS service, to access Copernicus data that is one of the, that is called the WIKEO. And we will exploit, services that have been implemented by another European project that is called Blue Bridge. So this is the set of infrastructures that we will integrate and provide access to. And let me move on. The idea is that we will build, and we are building, a virtual research environment that provide access to a number of blue cloud components and also integrate services and computing resources provided by the European Open Science Cloud. So this is, Blue Cloud will be a pillar, built on top of a European Science Cloud, and will support a number of communities, offering to each of them, accesses to resources, to data, to computing facilities, and to specialized services to perform their analysis. So it's not only, let me say, an environment where you can execute, your analysis, but it's also an environment that we offer to work in collaboration and with your team, with the other researchers that you work with, and in this way you can share the analytical methods. You can reproduce, repeat, reuse any of the results that has been produced, by one of your colleagues, and you can share data, processes, and findings, with your colleagues in different way, by use controlled sharing. You can grant open access to all the produced, data sets that you have generated by using the computing facilities that we provide. Clearly, we will be able to manage, big data. And also, your processes, can be implemented in any language. For example, we have seen before, mentioned by Alexander, Julia, or Fortran, or Java, R, and so on. All these languages are supported. So in the virtual research environment. So with the Blue Cloud, we will also, support, implement, 5 specific demonstrators that range from biodiversity, genomics, environment, fishery, and aquaculture, to catch, the different, let me say, research activities that are performed, and so different requirements. So the idea of having, specific demonstrators is clearly to collect requirements, but also to demonstrate the potential of cloud-based open science to the marine community, and so to serve as a catalyst for a wider community engagement. And clearly, in doing so, we collect, specific requirements about the technology in terms of storage, in terms of data access and data monetization, in terms of analytical processes and computing requirements. And we will build, as I said, on top of EOSC-based services, and we will deliver, Blue Cloud specific services with, that take into account, the Blue community specific needs. And this will generate, will create a reference model also for other thematic clouds. So, these are information about the project, not really relevant, just to say that we start, in October 2019, and the project will last, in 3 years. And you see the list of partners if you are interested in. Let me conclude just saying, that you can already exploit, our services. There is the first link that you can use. It's an open environment. You need, to register, but you can use any of your institutional account or Gmail, for example. And then you can use, some of the services that we already provide access to. You can see also a complete use case by accessing the second link, or clearly, there are all the information at our website. And with this, I thank you for your attention.
So thanks a lot, Pasquale. It was really exhaustive. It was a wonderful presentation of the overarching presentation of the Blue Cloud project. So we are going to move now to the closing part of the webinar. I saw that our speakers have been pretty active in replying to your questions in the chat, and thanks a lot for dropping your insights in the chat as well. And so I would like to, close the webinar with a specific roundtable. So I'd like to leave the floor to our speakers because I'll launch the subject of the future horizons of marine research and blue economy. So what do you see at the horizons? And I'll leave the reply to this very broad subject to our to our speakers. So whoever of you wants to take the floor, that's up to you to share your insights with our audience. I don't know, Jukka or
okay, this is Jukka. Yes, this is Jukka. If I very quickly give my brief insight, I think in near future we will see emergence of new technologies for biology and chemistry observations. So automated observations in that field. We are developing a lot of new technologies also related to DNA, etc. So there will be something coming out very soon. And the second development point, which is obviously going strong at the moment, is a multi-platform observations, also including the data fusion. And both of these have the element of big data in it. So in that sense, Phidias is in the middle of the story. And then finally, I think we are continuously improving the access to the data and to the services and products. So I think these are the elements we are improving at the moment.
Yes, Gilbert speaking now. I fully agree with Yuka, especially in terms of new observatories for biology and chemistry. There are a lot of new sensors which are developed or under development now, especially for chemistry. Genetic observation will be also integrated in at midterm in automatic observatories, and that will make a very strong difference with the present situation, which require expertise of people, in fact, to identify, for example, species and so on. That means that a very important increase of data in the future. At the moment, we estimate that the increase of data is 50% per year. That means that we double the data every 2 years or something like that. That is really quick increase of data. That means that we really need HPC or HPDA technologies for managing and for processing those data. And that's very important that Phidias is really test case for adapting or adopting those HPC and HPDA technologies for ocean data, and that's a key point for us. Yeah, thank you for your attention.
Very nice, Gilbert. I don't know if anyone else wants, maybe Pasquale from since he's fully involved with a Blue Cloud project from a different perspective. I don't know if you want to have a closing word on these future horizons or.
Yeah, I think, that, I mean, despite, we are looking, as Gilbert said, to an increase in the amount of data that are available to our researchers, to the researchers, and also an increase in the offer of, HPC and cloud computing facilities. And I believe, also thanks to the European Open Science Cloud, to EOSC, and to Pillar, initiative as Blue Cloud, the researchers will have access, to integrated environments where they can use, all those resources very easily. So differently from some years ago, where, it was planned to have just one infrastructure, now the vision is more towards, having, integrated environments where a community of users, can exploit, services that they need and access to the data, so not just one platform, not just one infrastructure, but a series of services that can be combined, in virtual research environments and exploited, to satisfy the needs of a specific community. So I would say that, thanks to initiatives as Phidias, as Blue Cloud, for the researchers, in the horizon would be, better environments, and so I believe, better research.
So thank you very much, Pasquale. So I think it's wrap-up time before running out of time. So a couple of things, a couple of practical things on my side, pretty logistic. Since some people already asked it in the chat, I just wanted to remind to all of you that by tomorrow you will be able to find both the presentation slides of each speakers and a recorded video of the webinar in the Phidias website, so you will be able to enjoy it at your leisure. And of course, I wanted to warmly thank all the attendees, all the people that joined us today. It's been a very informative and engaging webinar on our side, and a special thanks to all of our 5 speakers that have been impeccable and very insightful in their presentations. So very, very last reminder, stay in touch with us, stay in touch with the Phidias digital channels, because we will run a few more webinars in the rest of the year, and we are going to be tackling the other 2 use cases as well. So again, I'm closing it here. Thank you very much. Have a good day. Stay well, stay safe.